Drake didn't just get uncomfortable in LA that day. He allegedly hit the gas and left an entire music video set in Compton like the scene changed and nobody told him. And the wild part is, the story isn't even being used to clown him the way you'd think. It's being used to reframe Kendrick Lamar as the sensitive one, the game as the victim, and Drake as the guy who's somehow still running narratives from the passenger seat. Because right now, you've got three different conversations getting stitched into one. The old 100 video situation from 2015, the newer claims that Kendrick iced the game out over loyalty, and the media space victory lap where people swear Kendrick got destroyed while ignoring the one detail that makes the whole argument collapse. And I'm telling you up front, the real scandal here isn't whether Drake got spooked. The scandal is how fast the internet will accept a carefully edited storyline if it makes their favorite guy feel like a winner again. So today, we're going to walk through what's actually being claimed, what's publicly visible, what insiders and affiliates keep hinting at, and then I'm going to show you the part nobody wants to sit with. This Kendrick is obsessed angle only works if you pretend principle doesn't exist, and if you pretend certain people aren't getting paid in attention to keep pretending. And when we get to that moment later, the part where the loyalty math finally clicks, you're going to understand why Kendrick moving quiet wasn't weakness at all. It was strategy. Because if you let a certain type of friend stand next to your enemy in your own city, you're basically volunteering to get. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Alright, so here's what's on the table and why it matters right now. The core claim floating around is that Kendrick Lamar and the game had tension, or at least distance, after the game's 2015 record 100 with Drake, and specifically the video shoot in Compton. The argument from the Kendrick got destroyed crowd is basically Kendrick held a grudge for years because Drake came to Game's hood. And then they stretched that into Kendrick is emotional, Kendrick is obsessed, Kendrick is the real hater. But that's not the real question. The real question is, came to the hood and did what? Because if the point was just Drake shot a video in LA, that's normal. Rappers travel, videos happen, features happen. Nobody owns a zip code like it's a streaming exclusive. But if the allegation is that Drake came to Compton to shoot a video while throwing pointed bars at Kendrick in a moment where the Drake-Kendrick temperature was already a low simmer, then that's not just a feature, that's a move. That's a chess move with cameras on it. And this is where the game becomes the hinge in the whole story. Because the game has always been positioned as the West Coast bridge guy, the dude who can stand in rooms with everybody, name drop everybody, call everybody my brother, and still somehow end up in the middle of everybody's beef like a lightning rod with a playlist. Then you add the modern media layer, whack 100 stories, stat quo on the phone, academics in the background, poetic Flacco yelling like volume equals evidence. And now you don't just have hip-hop politics, you've got content politics. Narratives getting packaged as journalism, clips being weaponized as proof, and the loudest takeaway becoming the accepted reality. So the stakes aren't just, did Kendrick stop messing with Game? The stakes are, who gets to define what loyalty means in hip-hop in 2026 internet time? Who gets to rewrite old moments to fix today's reputational damage? And why are certain people so desperate to sell you Kendrick got destroyed when the public record suggests Kendrick's whole brand is he doesn't chase noise, he makes the noise chase him? So what's the truth here? Is Kendrick petty? Or is Kendrick disciplined? And is Game misunderstood? Or is Game finally getting read correctly? Let's get into what we can actually point to on the surface. First piece of surface-level evidence, the record itself, and the bars people keep pretending don't matter. The lyrics have been publicly available for years, and you can pull them up on Genius and read along. Drake's verse includes that very specific flex about core fans, conscious, and basically implying he could take another guy's fan base if he wanted to stay in that lane. Now, if you're being honest, you know exactly who that's aimed at without a name being said. That's the whole style of that era. Plausible deniability for the artist, obvious messaging for the culture. So when people say, why would Kendrick care? It wasn't even direct. My question is, do we listen to rap or do we listen to excuses? Because rap isn't just, did he say your government name? Rap is context, it's timing, It's location. It's who's standing next to you while you say it. And if you're Kendrick Lamar, a guy whose brand is being the final boss of "Don't Play With Me," then letting that verse get performed and filmed in your city isn't a neutral act. It's a statement, even if the statement is just, "I'm cool with this energy around me." Second piece of surface evidence, the years-long public pattern of the game making loyalty sound like a flexible subscription plan. This is not me calling Game untalented. Game can rap his face off, and anybody denying that is just being childish. But talent doesn't erase behavior. Game has a documented habit of collecting alliances like trading cards, then acting shocked when people don't trust the binder. One month, it's "I'm with you." Next month, it's "I'll slap you." Then it's "Why don't you call me?" That's not complex. That's exhausting.
So when a story pops up that Kendrick may have kept him at a distance, that doesn't automatically scream Kendrick is sensitive. It could just scream Kendrick is selective. Guarding your peace isn't a diss. It's a boundary. Does everybody understand how different those two things are? Third piece of surface evidence. The clip ecosystem itself. The way this story is being told. The versions making the rounds aren't coming from Kendrick. They're coming from intermediaries. Whack 100 telling a story, Stat Quo relaying a story, academics platforming a story, Poetic Flacco screaming a conclusion. And the conclusion is always the same. Kendrick is the weird one, Drake is the victim hero, Game is the loyal guy who got punished. But look at the mechanics. When the evidence is a chain of personalities, the incentives matter. These are not court transcripts. These are not official statements. These are content nodes. And content nodes don't just report events, they shape them. They clip the part that trends. They caption it with the angle that performs. They don't say, "Here's what we know." They say, "Here's what you should feel." And the funniest part, the same people who cry about manufactured narratives when it's Drake on the receiving end will turn around and manufacture a whole Kendrick psychological profile off one old video shoot story with zero direct quote from Kendrick, no time-stamped Kendrick interview, no Kendrick tweet, no Kendrick IG caption, just vibes, volume, and a caption that says "destroyed." So here's the question. If Kendrick is so obsessed, why is every piece of this story being narrated by people who aren't Kendrick? Why do we keep hearing about Kendrick's feelings from guys whose entire business model is interpreting Kendrick's silence like it's a confession? And that's just the surface layer, because once you zoom out, the Drake ran off set claim isn't even about courage or fear. It's about image management. It's about making Drake look relatable and smart while making Kendrick look irrational and controlling. And if you don't believe me, watch how fast the story pivots from Drake left for safety to Kendrick held an 11-year grudge. Those are two completely different conversations, stitched together on purpose. And speaking of stitching things together, and oh, do I have more for you, because the next layer is where the story gets nastier. Not the public lyrics, not the old video shoot, but the way people close to the situation talk when they think they're just kicking it on a call or a podcast. And to all the Drake defense attorneys in the comments warming up right now, I want you to pay attention to one specific thing coming up, the false comparison people keep using to make Game look reasonable. The "Kendrick did something with 50 Cent, so why can't I do something with Drake" argument. When you hear it broken down clean, you're going to realize that whole defense is a magic trick. Look at the left hand, ignore the right. Now, let's get into the cultural evidence, the inside talk, the affiliate talk, the "this is what the room felt like" talk, because that's where the motive starts showing. Cultural evidence piece 1, the stat quo angle, and the way information is being translated for Game. When you hear somebody like Stat Quo describe these dynamics, what you're really hearing is not a neutral news report. You're hearing a veteran explaining how the politics are perceived, and the perception is everything. If Kendrick's camp perceives Game as someone who talks too much, moves too loud, and switches posture depending on the room, then Kendrick doesn't need to hate him. He just needs to decide, "I'm not giving you access to my mind." Because here's what fans miss. In rap, proximity is currency. Who can call you? who can text you, who can say I was with him, who can imply they know what you're about to do next. If Kendrick removes your access, he's not just removing a friend, he's removing your ability to profit off being attached to him. And if you think I'm reaching, ask yourself how many times have you seen Game in interviews or clips where he talks about Kendrick like he's trying to little bro him, like he's trying to claim the origin story. That energy is not just annoying, it's competitive. It's, I should have been the torch. And you can hear that jealousy without anybody having to spell it out. Cultural evidence piece 2, the affiliate or insider commentary that frames it as pass the torch resentment. There have been plenty of conversations over the years in podcasts, in interviews, in community chatter about that early 2010s West Coast moment where Kendrick became the guy. The crowning, the cosigns, the momentum. And the idea being floated is that not everybody who showed up was emotionally on board with the new hierarchy, even if they were physically in the room. Now, I'm going to be fair for half a second. It's human to feel a way when you watch the culture move past you. That doesn't make you evil. That makes you human. But here's the part that kills Game's "I'm just loyal to everybody" defense. If you're still emotionally negotiating your place in the story, you will always do moves that sabotage trust. You'll overcompensate. You'll insert yourself. You'll name drop. You'll chase validation from the exact people who don't want to validate you, because validation feels like oxygen when your ego starts panicking. And that's why the Drake feature isn't just a song, it's a symbol. It says, I'll stand next to your rival on camera in the city that matters to you, and then act confused about why you tightened up.
Cultural evidence piece 3, the poetic Flacco/Kendrick destroyed media package, and how aggressively it omits the one fact that changes the moral math. The way those clips are framed is always, Kendrick mad Drake came to Compton, like Kendrick owns Compton. And that framing is designed to make Kendrick look like a cartoon villain guarding a gate. But the rebuttal is simple. It's not about owning Compton. It's about allowing somebody to dish you on your soil while smiling for the cameras. And this is where people reveal they either don't understand principle or they're pretending not to. If someone disrespects you in public, the why matters less than the where and the who co-signed it. You don't have to swing on anybody. You don't have to crash out. But you are absolutely allowed to decide, I'm not giving access to people who create opportunities for disrespect around me. Now, the counter-argument you're going to hear is, but Kendrick didn't say anything publicly, so it can't be that deep. And that sounds logical, until you remember who Kendrick is. Kendrick has never been a guy who runs to the internet for closure. Kendrick is a move accordingly person. Silence is his press release. So the absence of a Kendrick rant doesn't disprove the boundary, it supports it. And the final cultural tale, the one that should make you pause, is how quickly the conversation turns into a psych evaluation of Kendrick, while Drake's own long history of holding grudges gets ignored. We have years of songs where Drake subs people, revisits old tensions, sneak disrespects, then acts surprised when somebody responds with directness. So why is holding a grudge a mental illness when you assign it to Kendrick, but it's competitive spirit when Drake does it? At some point, the culture has to stop being allergic to consistency. And now we hit the gear shift. Because the real story isn't who's emotional. The real story is the system that monetizes calling somebody emotional. And that's where the attention interrupt happens. Here's the hard pivot. This isn't just rap beef discourse. It's an attention economy hustle. The modern hip-hop media system is built to do two things at the same time: maximize conflict and minimize accountability. That's why a story like Drake allegedly ran off set can get spun into Kendrick got destroyed. Those are not naturally connected ideas. They become connected when you need a narrative that performs. System angle 1, incentive-driven reporting. If your platform grows when you feed a certain fan base what it wants, you're not a journalist, you're a supplier. And the product is emotional certainty. This guy is lame, that guy is coping, this guy is obsessed. It doesn't matter if it's provable, it matters if it's clickable. That's why captions do so much work. A clip can be neutral, but the caption tells your brain what conclusion to download.
And once that conclusion gets downloaded, the audience starts defending the conclusion like it's their identity. Not because it's true, but because they already announced it in the comments. That's how propaganda works in miniature. Not government level, but algorithm level. The algorithm doesn't care who's right. It cares who reacts. So when you see the same players framing Kendrick as the problem, you have to ask, who benefits? Drake benefits because it softens his cultural loss anytime Kendrick is perceived as weird. Game benefits because it reframes his choice as harmless. Media personalities benefit because rage bite drives engagement. Everybody benefits, except the truth. System angle 2. Street validation as branding and how cities get used like props. Drake's entire brand has always included this shape-shifting, Toronto base, global pop star scale, but dipping into regional aesthetics for credibility. That's not a moral judgment. That's just the brand strategy. The problem comes when the brand strategy uses real places with real politics like their film sets. Because if you show up in a city with a local giant like The Game, you're not just shooting a video. You're borrowing legitimacy. You're renting an image. You're telling the audience, I can stand here and be safe, which implies a cosign from the environment. And if in that same moment you're throwing pointed bars at the city's most protected artist, you're basically saying, I'm comfortable disrespecting him here. That's why this isn't Kendrick owns Compton. This is you tried to use Compton as a backdrop for a narrative. And now bring in the alleged ran off set moment. If that story is true, it reveals something even funnier. The people around Drake were trying to manage the environment like it was real life, and Drake allegedly processed it like a movie scene that suddenly went off script. Which is human, by the way. If you think you're in danger, leave. No tough talk required. But the way the story is being told isn't Drake made a smart safety decision. It's being told as a vibe reset. See, Drake's not pretending to be tough. He's responsible. Meanwhile, the same storytellers will turn around and sell Drake as a villain when it benefits a different clip. That's the system. Everybody gets to be whatever the clip needs them to be that day. And this is where the Game comparison to Kendrick doing an episode of Power with 50 Cent becomes laughable. Because that comparison is designed to flatten context. Kendrick acting in a TV show is not Kendrick escorting someone into a city to throw
Subs at his friend. One is a professional gig in a fictional universe. The other is a real-world alignment in a real-world rivalry in a real-world location that carries real meaning. If you can't tell the difference, you're not confused, you're committed to misunderstanding. Now, let's connect the final dot. Why are we hearing all this translation talk like Game needs somebody to interpret Kendrick's feelings? Because that's what happens when you've burned trust. When you move messy, people stop addressing you directly. They stop explaining themselves. They stop giving you the dignity of closure. And then you're left chasing secondhand narratives, which makes you even more vulnerable to being used by the media ecosystem. So when you see Game positioned as seeking clarity, what you might actually be seeing is a guy seeking access again. Because access is the only thing he can't name drop his way into. And that brings us to the truth bomb. Because the payoff here is brutal if you're willing to be honest about it. Here's the major truth bomb. This whole Kendrick got destroyed storyline is not really about Kendrick versus Drake or Kendrick versus Game. It's about laundering one decision, Kendrick creating distance, into a character flaw. Because certain people need Kendrick to look irrational in order to make Drake's long-running pattern look normal. Think about the logic they're selling you. They're saying Kendrick is obsessed because he allegedly stopped dealing with someone after that someone facilitated disrespect around him. That's not obsession, that's standards, that's boundaries. That's literally the adult version of, I'm not arguing with you, I'm just done. And the reason they can't admit that is because if Kendrick's move is framed as principled, then it makes everybody else's move look weak. It makes Game look disloyal. It makes Drake look calculated. It makes the media personalities look like paid cheerleaders, whether they're paid in money or paid in clicks. So what do they do instead? They switch the lens. They make it about geography. You don't own Compton. They make it about time. It was 11 years ago. They make it about emotions. He's sensitive. Anything except the one thing is actually about respect in public. And if we're keeping it all the way real, the alleged Drake ran off set detail actually supports Kendrick's position even more. Because if Drake needed security protocols and allegedly panicked when the block got cleared, then what was he really doing there? Was he there because he's comfortable in that environment, or was he there because the optics were useful and the game provided the bridge? Exactly. So Kendrick's boundary isn't petty, it's protective. It says, I'm not letting my name be used as background scenery for somebody else's image campaign. And when you understand that, Kendrick's silence stops looking like avoidance and starts looking like leverage. He didn't crash out, he didn't beg for loyalty, he just removed access and let time prove the point. And the consequence of that is bigger than one friendship. It tells every artist watching, you don't have to scream to enforce a standard, you can just move. Now we land this plane, because the resolution is actually simple. The right person is still winning, and the wrong people are still auditioning for relevance. Kendrick Lamar's entire career is built on one thing: discipline. He doesn't flood the market. He doesn't do 20 interviews to convince you he's fine. He doesn't need a podcast circuit to translate his intentions. When he speaks, it's on wax, or it's through action. And that's why, even in a story where he's not even the narrator, he still ends up being the gravity. Look at what we just walked through. On one side, you've got the game, a guy who can rap but keeps ending up in these situations where he's asking other grown men to interpret why someone doesn't trust him. On the other side, you've got Kendrick, who allegedly just made a decision and kept moving, while the entire internet tries to reverse engineer his feelings like it's a leaked blueprint. That's the contrast one-liner right there. Kendrick moves like a CEO, everybody else moves like a focus group. And to the Drake fans who think this is me hating, let me ask you something real. If Kendrick was truly the fragile one, why does the media need so many middlemen to sell that story? Why can't Kendrick's fragility show up in his actions publicly? Why does it always have to be implied, rumored, interpreted, captioned, and screamed? Because the truth is, Kendrick's boundary is the most normal thing in the world. If someone you know helps someone else disrespect you, you don't need to make a scene, you just stop inviting them into your life. That's not a rap rule, that's a life rule. And the reason the culture keeps circling back to Kendrick is because he represents something the content ecosystem can't control. A person who doesn't need the algorithm. He can disappear and still dominate the conversation. Meanwhile, the narrative merchants have to post 3 times a day just to stay relevant.
So no, Kendrick didn't get destroyed by a clip of somebody yelling. If anything, this whole situation shows why Kendrick stays hard to reach, because the moment you let too many people stand too close to you, they start trying to sell your silence as a defect. And this is only the start, by the way, because the next phase of this story is going to be about who tries to turn these old moments into new music and who tries to turn them into new content. Watch what happens if the game decides to address this on wax again, or if Drake's camp keeps letting personalities float these Kendrick is obsessed angles like they're trial balloons. Watch who amplifies it. Watch who captions it. Watch who suddenly remembers old stories right when the timeline needs a distraction. And if Kendrick does what Kendrick usually does, which is let people talk until they corner themselves, then the next time he speaks, it won't be a tweet, it'll be a record. And then everybody who was doing the fake outrage Olympics is going to pretend they were just reporting, like we didn't just watch them cosplay as therapists for a man they've never met. So keep it locked right here. If you made it this far, you already know what type of time I'm on. I'm not letting the internet sell you a manufactured storyline just because it's louder than the facts. And in the next video, we need to talk about the real play happening underneath all of this, how certain media personalities keep acting like they're neutral while consistently framing one side as emotional and the other side as misunderstood, and how that pattern lines up with who still gets access, who still gets calls, and who still gets protected when the narrative turns ugly. Because when you see the access map, the whole game changes.